Hey, what's up everybody? This is Osaberg501 and today I want to go over the leaked legendary tier set called Cannonball. That is a general tier set in Outriders, so it is not for any specific class. Now before we get into the video, less than 5% of people that watch my videos are subscribed to my channel. So make sure to subscribe if you want to keep up with all of my uploads. Now, most of the tier sets in Outriders are going to be for a specific class, so only they can use it, but there will be a few general use sets. The developers have shown a piece or two of another one of these tier sets, but to my knowledge, this leaked one is the only one that we've seen the entirety of. And it's pretty interesting what they're putting on some of these general tier sets. And like with all of the other leaked legendaries I've gone over, don't pay too much attention to the actual numbers on them. We're mainly going to be focusing on the mods and the tier set bonus. So this is the Cannonball tier set, and the tier set bonus for this is killing an enemy with a melee skill replenishes ammo in your current magazine. Now I'm assuming because it doesn't have any amounts shown on this that it's probably your entire magazine, because usually with some of the other mods that replenish a certain amount of your magazine and not the entirety of the magazine, it usually specifies an amount of the magazine, so it seems like it's the entirety of whatever magazine you have. And as you'll see by that tier set bonus and going over a lot of these mods of this build is focused on being like a hybrid weapon and melee focus build, which can be pretty cool. I'm interested to see if this is actually a good build that you can actually run using this generic tier set and doing a melee focused build. Because if you don't know, there's actually two different melees in the game. There's the melee that's just a general melee that kind of has a cone effect in front of you. Then there's sprinting and doing a melee, which you jump in the air and slam into the ground, and whatever class you're on has a different effect on their melee. And that has a much larger radius, meaning that your melee can pretty easily be a really strong AoE ability. So first up, we have the Mask of the Cannonball. The tier 3 for this is Purity, reduces the duration of negative statuses by 75%. Now this is actually pretty massive depending on how often enemies are going to apply status effects to you later in the game, because status effects actually have a different effect on your character than it does with AI, at least some of them. Say if you get frozen, you can just melee and it breaks the freeze off you. If you freeze an AI, they're just frozen for however long the freeze lasts. And this could be pretty massive, especially for certain content in the game, because I'm sure there's going to be bosses that apply status effects all the time. I'm sure there's going to be, say, monster hunts that apply status effects constantly, or different expeditions that is a focus of that specific expedition. So this mod, even if this set isn't super useful for that content, this mod could definitely be something that you put on different armor pieces to fight against status effects. And the other mod is Bloodlust. Killing shots increase your firepower by 85,000, stacks up to 3 times, and deteriorates every 10 seconds. So essentially how this works is you kill something, you get that firepower buff for 10 seconds. Now you can kill 2 more things and still get it stacked up to 3 times, but the first stack will still end in 10 seconds no matter what. It's not like some other skills where, say you get 1 stack, then when you get the second one, it refreshes the timer on all stacks. This one, all of the stacks have their own independent timer, but you can still get additional firepower up to that 3 stacks. And this is still a pretty strong ability, especially for AoE fights where you're fighting tons of different enemies, because even though, like I said, don't pay too much attention to the numbers, comparing this to officially released items, this seems to still be quite a bit of firepower. Next up, we have a Vest of the Cannonball. The tier 3 for this is not impressed. Reduces the damage taken by elites by 20%. So this is an incredibly basic tier 3 mod, but most likely will be decently strong and maybe even used on other armor pieces. Because like I've said before, going by pretty much any other RPG, any other looter shooter, any other games like that that have elite enemies, ARPGs, stuff like that, the further you get into the game, the more you get into endgame, the more elite enemies you're going to be facing. And most likely once we get into the end game, get into high world tiers, get into expeditions, higher challenge tiers, there's probably going to be more and more elite enemies, which is one of the ways the difficulty will start scaling. And those are going to be the enemies that are hitting the hardest. So having a good damage reduction against them can be pretty strong. I'm just not certain how strong this will actually be compared to having some other tier 3 mod. Then we have a buckshot shells. Shotgun weapon damage increased by 15%. This seems to be the piece of the armor that has super basic mods this tier 2 honestly doesn't seem that strong. I mean, maybe it'll be something that you have if you're specifically on a shotgun build, but it seems like there's a lot of other tier 2 mods and just even tier 1 mods in general that are quite a bit stronger than this. Next up, we have Gauntlets of the Cannonball. The tier 3 for this is Captain Hunter. Increases damage against elites by 20%. Just like the other mod that we just went over, the tier 3 of the last armor piece. It's just a general damage increase against elites that's going to get better the more you get into the end game. This one seems like it will probably be more used because of how the game works on healing. You can get pretty much any gun in the game with weapon lifesteal on it. You can put in class points that give you weapon life steal, and even the Technomancer has that built-in baseline to their healing. So there's a lot of ways to heal off of damage, which increases the survivability with this mod, but also lets you kill the enemies that are truly dangerous much quicker. Most likely this one will be used in some other builds and will probably be used a lot more than the damage reduction from elites. Then the other mod is Personal Space, grants you a 25% bonus to close range weapon damage. Now this one is a really strong tier 2 mod, and we just went over the mod that increased your shotgun damage by 15%. This most likely is something you would use over that 100% of the time. None of the shotguns that I've used in the game in the demo so far at least have really had like really long range. Usually once you get a little bit of range, it does significantly less damage. So having 25% bonus in close range, which you're already going to be with a shotgun, is much better than just 15% increase of shotgun damage. And we've also seen a mod on one of the other leaked armor sets I went over that increases the range at which enemies are considered to be close range. So you can even have a build that is specifically built on close range, has that mod to increase the range at what is considered close range, have this that increases your weapon damage by 25%, which is pretty massive at close range, have a ton of class skills that increase close range damage, and just have a build specifically focus on that. So I think this mod, whether it will be used on this armor set or not, is pretty strong. Next up, we have a leg Armor of the Cannonball. The tier 3 for this is Brawl, increases your melee skill damage by 100%. Now this is pretty massive, and I know, if I'm not mistaken, there are class skill points for most of the classes that you can put in to buff up your melee skill in some way. Some increases the damage. I think there was one that increases range, but I'm not 100% certain on that. And this is pretty massive. From what we've seen in the demo and some other footage from the developers, the melee skill is actually a really strong baseline. Even at later into the game, the skill is still really strong because they all apply some status effect, and you can do the sprinting melee, which does a big AoE. So baseline, having your melee skill be strong is pretty good, but then adding 100% damage is pretty massive, especially considering that the melee skill can be used pretty often. I think even if you do the big slam, it's only like a couple second cooldown, so this could definitely facilitate a full melee build. The tier set bonus is focused on meleeing as well. This gives such a big damage increase and makes it much more worth trying something like that. Then the tier 2 mod is Move Groove. Moving increase your anomaly power by 50,000 and firepower by 63,000. So this seems like something that could be good because you do generally move a lot in this game, even when fighting and even with, say, zooming in with a scope or something like that. It all depends on the threshold. Like, do you have to be moving for a second for it to start working, or is just doing a small strafe back and forth gonna keep this procced? Overall, depending on the threshold, this could be decently used or probably never used, depending on, like I said, the threshold on when it activates. But overall, could be a decent mod, but I'm thinking that it won't be used that much. And finally, we have a Footgear of the Cannonball. The tier 3 for this is Martial Arts. Reduce the cooldown of your melee skill by 50%. So just more going in to a melee focused build. Like I said, the cooldown is already pretty low, especially if you do, or even if you do the leaping AoE melee. So reduction of 50% essentially allows you to probably spam melee, probably pretty much all of the time. And that's one of the things that's a little bit weird with this set with some of these mods, especially this one, is that it seems like with the tier set bonus that it wants you using your weapon, then using your melee skill as like a secondary, but also still buffing up your melee skill so when you use it, it's still a strong part of your rotation. But with this, it seems like it's trying to get you to be a more fully focused melee build. So I'm not certain how all the mods and the tier set bonus are going to mesh together, but I definitely think there's going to be some people trying builds that are focused on melee, have a massive amount of melee damage. Now it's a reduction of the cooldown. So maybe you could have even a build that pretty much only uses melee. There's definitely a possibility of that. Then we have have the tier 2 Phantom Dash. During combat, your default roll is replaced with Phantom Dash, which enables you to quickly pass through enemies. And this seems like something that's one of those mods that doesn't have like a straight power increase of damage or survivability, but this seems like something that is going to be used in quite a lot of builds, because this just makes the combat a lot more fluid, first off, but also being able to phase through enemies with your roll that is pretty much infinitely spammable is really strong as well. I'm also wondering how big the distance is going to be for this Phantom Dash. There's a possibility that this makes it so you're going to want to spam your roll if you have this mod to actually move around the map faster. And it seems like something that could be really cool for a lot of builds and just a pretty big gameplay changer in general. So that is the entirety of the Cannonball general tier set in Outriders. And even if this set with its set bonus isn't used that much in general, I think a lot of the mods on these do have a pretty high general power increase. And I could definitely see a lot of these mods being used in a lot of the other builds that people try. Like I said, Phantom Dash could be used in pretty much any build. You have damage increase against elites, it could be used in any build. You could have a full melee based build with a reduction on the cooldown, massive damage increase. So a lot of these mods in here are super good, even if the tier set itself isn't used that much. So subscribe if you want to see more Outriders or other videos. Leave a like if you liked the video. Leave a comment down below what you guys think about this tier set, and thanks for watching.